Welcome to another episode of the Fabric Library podcast. These are coming thick and fast. Now we've got some serious feedback from the previous month, and it is one thing for sure. People are loving it, and you guys are loving it. The design community that's watching and listening and learning. For me, that is the most important. The fact that there's so much to learn from our industry. We talk to designers, we talk to architects, we talk to business owners who've made it big here in the UAE, and also those who we work closely with. Another fantastic client of ours, or rather friend by now, is the owner and CEO of Design House, Sharon O'Keeffe. She's our guest for today. Welcome. And
Thank you.
How
so
are you
much.
doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure having you. I mean, listen, we've worked together for a while. Obviously, we've known each other for only a while, but you've had a long relationship with Fabric Library. But we'll get into that. Before that, let's talk about you, because the focus is on you on this podcast. The Design House, this amazing business that is, that you've built up. When I mention the Design House, what's the first thing? What's the first feeling that comes to you? How do you describe it?
I feel like it's all one, me and the Design House.
Right. It's a very personal thing to you.
It is.
Right?
It is.
Let's talk about how it came about. Where did you get inspiration to become a furniture maker, a furniture company?
So most people know the Design House as the furniture store it is now,
Right.
which is 3 years old.
Mm.
But the Design House for me started 8 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
So it started as a side hustle. I used to be Emirates cabin crew.
Yes. So I've heard. Yeah.
Yes, I think we spoke about this previously.
Mm.
So I used to work for Emirates, and while I was there, it was a great job. I loved it. I was crew for 10 years, but there was so much time off. I knew that I could do something on the side, and I started getting into interior design.
Right.
And I used to do that on the side. On my days off, I used to go design villas, whatever the client's requirements were.
Right.
And I loved it. But however, flying, I only had so many hours, and I thought maybe I need to develop a product. And I'd always been toying with this idea, but nothing really, sprung out or stood out in my mind. And then COVID hit. And just before COVID, I'd had some clients who needed sofas made, to be made for their projects. So I went to factories and I said, can you make this sofa for me? And they were like, yeah, no problem. So I would go in and I'd be like, same, but different. I was like, somehow it's not.
Right.
And they were always very uncomfortable. And of course, the client wants a sofa to be comfortable.
Absolutely.
And I thought, you know what? I need to see where it's going wrong. I'm a very curious person. So I was like, how can the furniture stores get it so right, but the manufacturers just weren't seeming to connect the dots? So I started seeing how to make a sofa. And it started from there, really.
Right.
And then after I kind of mastered our first sofa, designers would come to me and say, hey, Sharon, who made that sofa for you? I'd be like, I made it myself.
Wow.
And then they were like, okay, could you make one for me? So it was quite organic. And then when I saw, okay, we have a business here, then I really got into it.
Right.
So I went and studied sofas, everywhere. I would sit on them in every store, understand why they felt different. And then I went and had a mattress manufacturer explain the whole process to me,
Right.
how they make mattresses. And I applied the same rules to the sofas, and everything changes. And even now, as the business has evolved, I continuously look back, how can we make them better? So the whole Design House started with sofas.
Right. Sofas. I mean, we love that because we're all about sofas.
Of course, fabric. Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting you said that, because even for me, I have two completely contrasting professions. I come from a broadcast and journalism.
Well, we just found out now, right?
Yeah. And then now here I am selling fabrics and, of course, leading the team at Fabric Library for sales. Was there anything growing up that inspired this interior designer in you that you wanted to go on and draw? Because obviously, cabin crew is completely something different to what you're doing now. Was there something in there? Was there a spark since childhood that ignited this whole interior design thing?
You see, interior design, I think, is the end product of what just happened to come about. I think, if it wasn't interior design, it would have been something else. I think I was always kind of destined to do something along the lines of working for myself.
Right.
It just so happened.
So it was an entrepreneurial spirit.
I think it's always been there.
Right.
There was a teacher I met when I was at home recently, and me and my mom were out walking, and I met her, and she's like, oh, Sharon, it's great to see you, and having the chats. And she said, I remember when I mustn't be more than 8, and I was in her class, this priest came into the classroom, and he was saying about how there was these babies in Africa and they were really poor. And I said, this is really sad, we can do something. So I got my friend's mom to drive us to the town, and I made these paper things. And the next day in school, I sold them. to the class, like the people in my class. We made like £30, which back then was a lot of money.
Of course.
And I said to the teacher, like, I made this £30 for the priest. And she's like, what? She's like, this priest used to call her, like, remember that child that came in with this money, you know? So I think it's kind of always been there a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. I forgot to mention to those watching that Sharon is Irish.
Yes.
I don't know too many Irish people. Maybe I've met a couple of commentators because I'm a cricket commentator as well. What's life
Cricket.
like growing up in Dublin or?
No, Kerry, down south.
Right. And
Yeah.
what was life like growing up in a small town in Ireland?
So where I'm from, it's a really small village in
Right.
Kerry. Kerry is in the south, as I said, and it's outside of a town called Killarney.
Right.
Killarney is beautiful. Probably if anyone has been to Ireland or knows Ireland, they will know of Killarney. It's like picturesque, like
Really?
postcard, perfect. But I grew up on a farm,
Mhm.
like very different to my life now. 3 brothers, mom, dad, like really nice, like very wholesome.
Right.
Definitely got work ethic from my, surroundings where we grew up. We were always very hands-on. Even recently when I was home, my brother was saying, someone asked him, where did you all get your work ethic from? Steve was like, the farm.
Amazing. It's the kind of stuff we read in books as kids, beautiful farm in a
Yeah.
far off village somewhere in
Yeah.
England or Ireland.
Yeah.
Amazing. And it's quite different now though, because you're not living in a complete contrast in terms of weather, in terms of the surroundings, coming from all green, all beautiful. I mean, I'm not saying Dubai is not beautiful, but it's a completely different beautiful, a completely different thing. So how are you finding that change? Would you wish to go back to something like that?
I go back a lot now.
Okay.
A lot. But I think to go back forever would be very difficult. I know my family would love me to go back forever. And I mean, part of me would also, because I'd love to spend more time with my family
Of course.
and friends.
Of course.
But I think now, really Dubai, it has become my home. I'm here now 12 years. 12 years in October.
Right.
It seems like a lifetime ago I came.
Yeah.
And I really like it here. I'm very happy here. And I feel as big as Dubai is, it's also very small. Like
Absolutely.
I have friends since I came at the beginning and they've all continued to live here. And they have families now. So we have a real community here. So I think I can't see myself moving back.
But that's the thing about Dubai, it spoils you. One thing, you love the place, love the community, and also the conveniences and all of that. In the previous podcast, we were talking about how there's so less bureaucracy. At least that comes from a more Middle Eastern and Asian background where we have to really, put up with a lot of bureaucracy in getting things done. Maybe that's not something that affects you so much. But you're right. Once you've lived here, it's very hard to then go back and get used to life back home. But I think we've rolled the years too far ahead talking about going back, but let's talk about
Yes.
what's going on here. So let's talk about your time with Emirates as a cabin crew. So you said you had a lot of time off. Now, what do you mean by time off? In the sense while flying or your days off between your schedules of flights?
Yeah, so like when I joined Emirates, to give you a little backview, I used to be a social worker in Ireland.
Right.
So our hours there were very long. So I was used to working a very full week.
Right.
And then I joined Emirates and it's shift work. So if I fly to London this morning, I fly for 7 hours. And even on that flight, during the flight, there's so much, okay, it's busy, the flight, but like there's definitely going to be 1 or 2 hours where you have time to think, you have time to maybe do something. And then when you land in your destination, you have 24 hours off, maybe 2 days. And then you come back and you also have 1 or 2 days off.
True.
So I mean, in a week, you maybe have like 4 days that you have time to get thinking, doing something else. And this is where the whole design house like grew from. A lot of it came from boredom.
Right.
Like lack of fulfillment from the days off.
Wow.
Because if you think of social work versus Emirates, I mean, I loved traveling, I loved all of this, but you don't have the same sense of fulfillment, right? And that's where I thought, I can do something more. I can. Also, I was thinking, how am I going to end with Emirates? It's such a great job. You get to travel the world, everything. What's your exit strategy out of this? Because it's not a job you do forever. So I was always kind of thinking of this. What can I do next? What am I good at? That was really the key thing. Identifying what were my real skills that, I possessed that I could utilize to their maximum capacity. And I think when I broke that down, somehow it all came about to this.
Amazing. And it's amazing because obviously with the job that you had as a cabin crew, one of the privileges is that you get to see the world and you can very easily get caught up in that privilege. I forget about everything else. I'm living the life of my dreams. I'm seeing the world, traveling everywhere. One day I'm in Paris, the other day I'm in London. You could have easily got caught up with that, but it's great to see that you had a vision, that you wanted something more out of life than just enjoying what was on hand. So that's where I guess you got your inspiration for starting to drawing sofas in your free time. Is that what you started doing?
No, so imagine now I was flying and I was designing villas. So I really was a full-on interior designer.
Right, even while flying.
This is all flying.
Right.
So it was 2016. My mom came to Dubai and she, because Emirates wouldn't give me an NOC, she had to sign the papers for the license for the design house.
Right.
Yes. So back then when it started, I was fully interior design. Like I was doing clay schools, I was doing villas, everything. And as I got more into the residential side of things, of course, that's where the customization comes in. And the real customization for comfort and for, personal, what this client likes. And that's where I struggled to get the manufacturer. I just couldn't. And as I tried to develop it, eventually I just came to the conclusion, either I take this on myself and really manage the whole, drawing to the conception to everything and see what comes out the other side. And of course, once I started to do this, I thought, you know what, I'm kind of good at this.
Right.
As in like, it looks something like how I wanted it to be. Of course, from the beginning, I mean, it wasn't plain sailing. Like, you can imagine.
Of course. No business is when you start.
No. Yeah. And there was so much learning. But it was that learning, continuous, like, how can I make it better? Why does their sofa look like this and mine doesn't? Like when I look at the big brands, like if someone has done it, it means it's possible, right?
Of course.
So if it's possible for them, it has to be possible for me. It's just understanding how to, and that's really where I absolutely poured myself into it. In 2020, when COVID hit, excuse me, Emirates offered time off.
Right.
They said, who wants to take unpaid leave? And I was like, okay, straight away.
This is my chance.
This is my chance. And I took it. And my manager kept extending it every time I asked. I said, you know what, this is great. We're going to keep rolling with this. I took 18 months in the end.
Wow.
Plus, I think it was very important for me to try and see if I could self-fund. Because obviously Emirates weren't paying us at this time. So, how was it going? Was it actually a business that I had? And that was 2020. 2021 in the July, I opened our first store.
Right. So
at this stage, I could see that, something's working. And people were getting to know, like word of mouth, that I got this sofa from the design house. I got this. And when I opened the first store, I had no staff.
Right.
And I opened on, I think it was the 31st of July. And on the 3rd of August, I went back flying.
Wow. 2 days after, literally.
So I had Eileen had just come about.
Right.
And she was so fresh. I mean, I was like, hi, Eileen. Welcome to the design house.
This is your first hire?
Yes, my first hire. And she just had her 3rd year anniversary.
Oh, fantastic.
At the end of July.
Congratulations, Eileen, if you're listening.
Eileen, yeah. Oh, you know what was so cute? We had a post for her. I said, Eileen, it's 3 years.
Right.
Like, not to go off topic, but like Eileen was a special hire because, that was kind of make or break for me. If Eileen hadn't been who she was, I wasn't there to monitor. I wasn't there to know what she was doing.
Right.
And she really took it under her wing and minded it, as though it was her own. So I was able to continue flying because I needed it at the time. Like there's no funding for the design house. So I had to make sure I had money coming in to make sure I could afford the rent, afford the salaries. And at this point, like Eileen's obviously, my responsibility. I have to make sure that at the end of every month, I have the wages to be able to pay.
Absolutely,
So I went back flying then and I continued flying for another year. And then organically, I just came off a flight one day and it was just so busy. At this point, we had taken the second showroom.
Wow.
And I said, you know what, it's time.
It was like a switch in your head.
Yeah, I came off and I remember being like, okay, I just can't go to work tomorrow, which is not the kind of person I am. But of course, at this stage, I built the business. It's time for me to make the transition. So I rang my manager and I just said, I think it's time to call it a day. With Emirates, they're a machine. Right. So it's not like, me losing one of my staff. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think they were sorry to see me go, but at the same time, you're just a number in a machine that's that big, right?
Yeah, and that also must have made you realize how important it is for you to be on your own, that, being that entrepreneur, that you don't have to rely on that just being another person or just being another number.
No. Now, in saying that, I mean, my time with Emirates was so valuable and I respected them so much as a company. I mean, to this day, I still fly Emirates. There is no one else I would ever consider. They're just, and what they taught me as well, like all their policies, strategies, procedures. At the time for me, I used to roll my eyes and think, oh my God, you know, but now it all makes sense.
True. No, it takes a lot of, I think, organization. It takes a lot of clarity to run big companies like that. And that brings me to the next point, because even I see with my two world contrasting professions, from cricket broadcasting to selling fabrics, I mean, on the surface, there's nothing in common between the two.
Samir, cricket, why?
I mean, you're Irish, you should know cricket. Come on.
You know, it's the one thing I don't watch, excuse me.
Really? Wow, okay.
The one that I do not watch.
I'm surprised we're still friends. Anyway, no, so I was just thinking about it and I was pondering over it, but I came to a conclusion that, okay, maybe it doesn't have anything common on the surface, but as a leader of my sales team and the head of the marketing team, I need clarity in communication, I need leadership skills, and I need adaptive thinking. I need to be thinking on my feet. So those were things that helped me in both professions. As a commentator, you need to be thinking all the time what you're going to say next. Even when you're leading the sales team, if the salesperson comes to you with a problem, you need to be very clear in what you tell them and the instructions you give them. What things did you find with your time at Emirates, with the learnings that you had there, that have helped you gain that success with Design House?
So definitely customer service.
Right.
Like with Emirates. Have you ever flown Emirates?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
This
is it. Yeah.
A few times, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. It's a lot of people's favorite airline, including Gary's, I'm sure.
You definitely Gary's, yes.
Yeah.
But their customer service, it's just second to none. And from day one, it's ingrained in you, like the importance of the customer, and it's the experience. Like when we, because obviously when the Design House started, it was, as I said, just me and Eileen.
Right.
We didn't need to have customer journeys or SOPs or anything, because it's just the two of us. We knew it. But now as the team has grown and more people are coming on board, it's so important to explain the customer journey, the key points that where it can make or break their experience. Also, so that's the customer side of things. But then also the business side of things. What are the key points in the journey that are super important to identify? So now we have a whole, like, it's like a manual almost, like SOPs, systems, procedures. And I mean, I only learned that from Emirates. Every time I think, why did we make this mistake, or how did this happen? The mistake I never focus on. I'm happy it happened, if anything, because you make all your learnings from this.
Correct.
So even like, yesterday, one of my team messaged me last night. She's like, "Sorry, Sharon." I was like, "There's no need to be sorry. We made it. We'll learn from this.
We're human. We are
100%." And I was like, sometimes it's great because when you start with this SOPs, there's like maybe 5, 6 of them. Now there's, no joke, there's like almost 100 of them. Something for everything. If you're confused about anything, you can go and see what works. Like, why do we have to follow this? Yeah.
Amazing. And again, going back to while you were juggling with Emirates and putting up Design House, now we only sell fabric, so it's just one component of a furniture, right? Even that requires so much attention. You've got to go meet customers. They'll ask you for samples at midnight. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Now you are not just obviously making furniture, but you're dealing with your suppliers, you're dealing with factories, and the most important, dealing with your customers, who can be very demanding sometimes.
Yeah.
How did you then find the time and the balance to do all of these things?
I worked 24/7. Like, really 24/7. I mean, I would get up in the morning before the flight. Like, if the flight left at 4 a.m., I would have to get up at least 2 hours before it.
Right.
Like, really, actually, to the point that I couldn't have maintained it for very long. I just worked all the time. Like, the bus to work used to be about 45 minutes. And I remember that time, I used to even take my head out of my phone, my planning. But then when you're on the flight, like now, sometimes I wish for those hours of solitude back.
Yes.
Because when you're on the flight, for example, you run out of Wi-Fi. No one can contact you.
Correct.
Also, I shouldn't have been on the Wi-Fi when I was Emirates. But like, I used to spend all the time on it because it was great. I mean, I could, coordinate with Eileen. But a lot of the work, it's really about the planning. It's about the designs. It's about signing off the drawings. So I used to get a lot of work done when I was up there. And I used to work in the lounge, which also was great for business. Like, me and Gary spoke about this recently, when you're on the flight as a customer and you're in the lounge and you're talking to someone, like, who's behind the bar, you're never going to think they're going to be like, "Oh, I can help you with that. I can sell you a sofa. Like, I can design your home." So it was really good for business. Like, some of my clients to now, like my really like clients/friends, I met them in the lounge.
Amazing. So that's where you made your connections in terms of getting your customers.
Exactly. And then when I used to come off of the flights, sometimes it wasn't the healthiest thing, to be honest. Excuse me. I used to go straight to work.
Right.
So I could have come off a New York flight, but I would have no choice. I would have been gone for 2 days. So we would land maybe 7 a.m. I would come home, shower, and go to work.
Oh, wow.
Not sustainable for a long time. But I mean, you know, it ramped up throughout the years. And the needs of the business changed.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say, you know, just came to the point where I just had to go, the point that I went, we already had the first store and we were opening like what was going, it is now the store. But it was just, I mean, the demand was massive.
I can imagine you must have been scraping off like every single second. Now, setting up itself, you know, a furniture store, you've got to have a few things right. And I think one of the most important things is suppliers, your factories who you work with. I mean, as a woman especially, sometimes it can be demanding finding the right factories, you know, going to those places. How hard was it for you?
I think I was quite lucky.
Okay.
I think I was quite lucky with my first factory. I suppose it wasn't really. It's my first successful factory.
Right.
Like, I mean, when I think of it, you know, I mean, I went through it all, trying to find, first of all, it's like, do I take my own factory? And then I'm not really, that business model for me, it's like, it's different. You're then a manufacturer. So when I went into getting my suppliers itself, as a woman, I didn't really feel like it was a woman. It was more my expectation.
Right.
And if you're going to stick to your word and stand with that expectation that I have.
Right.
And like everyone that I have now is a supplier. I mean, you know, it starts at the beginning, right? It's like you expect a lot and they're like, who is this person, you know?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, ooh, Sharon in the design house, give us X amount, you know? And then they're like, okay. I think slowly, but it's just natural. Like, you know, at the beginning of any relationship, it just expands over time, right? And now I see, like, with all of our factories, I mean, it's amazing, you know? I mean, it's like one. You know, there's just extensions of the design house.
Right.
I mean, look at even like us. Like, you're one of our suppliers.
Favorite supplier.
Yes, you really are, though, like, you know? And I mean, when I think about it, you know, calling you guys, I don't think like, oh, I'm calling Fabric Library. No. I'm like, you know, Gary is the first one to help with anything. It's just an extension. And you see us kind of the same way, right?
Yes.
So like we have a problem. If you have a problem, it means we have a problem. And if I have a problem, it means again, we have a problem.
Yes.
And I think when we come from that stance, even now, like when we go to the factories, it's not like that I would go in there or any of the team would go in there and be like, you know, you do this and this. It's like, no, we have to solve this as a team. And I also think, like at the start, don't get me wrong, there's so many teething problems. But I think when there's that many teething problems with someone, you know it's not the right fit.
Correct.
That they for sure are the right fit for someone, just not for us. And I think eradicating those quickly is probably like was key.
I think it's important that yours as a business and those who you work with, your stakeholders, your values and your goals have to be aligned. Otherwise, 100%. It's very tough to achieve the end goal, which is a happy customer, right? Now, I now see, listening to you, the way you work, your work ethic and your values, I now see why you have such a strong connection with Gary also, because it's very similar. Like Gary has that even after he's achieved everything that he has in life. He still wakes up every day and he's in the office the first and he's the last to leave. And sometimes we can be embarrassed. What are you doing? Give us a chance, you know. How do you translate that work ethic into the people that you hire? Do you have a philosophy that you follow? Do you have a set thing that you follow?
You know what I'll say before I answer that question is, you know, you said about, you know, Gary and the design house and, you know, this work ethic that you guys have as well. Like credit where credit is due. Like I know we've had issues with clients where they've come and said, you know, my fabric hasn't lasted. We don't really need to know too much about it from their stance. We just know that they have a product that should have lasted longer and it needs to be fixed ASAP.
Right.
And I remember bringing it something like this to you guys. And I think that's where really I took a step back to say, okay, Fabric Library, really, they are going to support us. Because when a customer comes and says to me, hey, Sharon, you know, fabric on my chair is fading or, you know, it's not looking how it should and it's 6 months. There's no conversation needs to be had. It just means that the product they've paid for, it's in some way faulty. So all I have to do, I think, as quickly as possible, fix this chair for them. And then I need to understand myself why it happened. Right. And I remember this happened with a client in Abu Dhabi. And straight away, Gary's like, bring that back. We fix it immediately. It wasn't even a conversation had. It was just, you know, Sharon, you're so right. Bring that back and we'll fix this.
Right.
And I think all of those, when you compound all of those experiences, it just strengthens everything.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, that relationship is important. Like I said, the end goal is to have a happy customer.
Yeah.
And, you stick to your promises.
Yeah.
I promise you a quality product, and then you're going to get that. Problems, we'll fix it for you. Going back to that, how do you then trickle that down to your people in the company?
Yeah. So remember I said like Eileen was my first hire.
Yes.
And you know why I think I'm always very grateful to having made that key hire at the beginning with Eileen was because she set the standards, right? So when everyone else came on board, I mean, we selected them all ourselves,
Right.
handpicked, but in them, all the people that we choose to work at the design house, when you come for your interview, there are certain characteristics you just have to have. I mean, you've been to the showroom, right?
Of course.
I mean, the team are just...
It's a buzzing place. I like the vibe.
Yeah, but they are incredible. Like they are, as much as I like to think that I guide them and, but I think the tone is set. And the people that come to work there, they know that this is how business goes. I mean, with any place, like as you said, like when you walk in there, you get a vibe. Like when customers come in, they know what they're going to expect.
Right.
The team are the same. And everything they do, from like dealing with the customers to dealing with the suppliers, everything is just phenomenal. And I always get, compliments about the team.
Right.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, from me, like from a leader's perspective, I suppose they always want like mistakes, as I told you. When we make the mistakes, I'm not so concerned about that. We just want to make sure that it never affects the customer's experience and what learning can we take from it. And I think they know themselves that like mistakes are okay, but it's like, why? I'm always about the why. Like, why did it happen? Like, and then we take understanding from that and we just learn from it.
I think it's very important you mention the why. It's not always about who made the mistake, because very often our human instinct is that we look for someone to blame.
Yeah.
Oh, it's because of him or it's because of her. But
Yeah.
I think first we figure out the why, and then we learn from it, saying, okay, whoever made that mistake
100%.
should not make it anymore.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that's such a good learning to take away. Sharon, it's been, I think, a lovely conversation. Let's now look to the future. We've looked at how you came about, how you're running the operations now. 10 years down the line, what do you want Design House to be from here on? And what is Sharon doing 10 years from now?
What is Sharon?
Where do you envision yourself?
My goodness. Okay, so the Design House, like 10 years from now, like there's so many plans. You can imagine like what we started as just a short 3 years ago and where it's come to now.
Right.
I mean, obviously now we've started shipping internationally as well. And there's huge demand from Europe for our products. So we're looking at a lot of logistics to that sector. Also the expansion of our product lines. Where does that go? I mean, it's so exciting. When you have this like business that you can really, create multiple different, sectors out of it.
Diversify from it, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's about not getting too far ahead, right?
Right.
What else? I mean, we always think about, people have asked us to open in Abu Dhabi, second stores. I'm not so sure about this. I mean, the thought is nice, but it's what comes with that.
Right.
Even like, opening, I mean, I was asked to open in Dublin.
Wow, okay.
Which I was like, okay, I mean, nothing would please me more than having a store in Ireland.
Back home, yeah, exactly.
But I think you also have to think about the model, what changes with everything, how does it all go like that?
Right.
I think the most important thing for me right now is growing the team to take care of what we have right now. And I think everything else just comes from this.
Right.
I mean, the team itself, like over the last year even, has expanded like almost double.
Right.
And we've made a few like key hires for people for the expansion. But I think just for now, we're going to focus on the steady growth over the next, I'd say, 3 years.
The goal is to put it in an aviation pun, to get into autopilot mode in
That's
the
exactly
business. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the goal, I guess. One last question before we wrap up is that, for me, feedback and encouragement is very important in both my fields, whether I'm commentating or whether I'm selling fabric. There's always that one moment that feels like, oh, you know what? I'm so glad I'm doing this. This is what I live for. Have there been moments in the last 4 years that you felt like this is the peak of, why I'm doing this? This is exactly what drives me. Have there been such moments?
Oh, yeah. I mean, last year when we won Furniture Manufacturer of the Year,
Right.
we won in the ID Awards last year for that.
Fantastic. Okay.
And I remember going up on stage. I don't even remember being on stage. I almost felt like I was going to black out. I remember they called the design house and I was so unprepared because there was 2 other big names in the same category.
Oh, so you didn't know you were going to win it?
No.
Wow.
So I just attended and I was like, oh, this is really nice, And then they called the design house. I was like,
We've won?
We won. And that was super special. Also, we've had a lot of large brands coming to us trying to take our products to collaborate with us.
Right.
That for me is, you remember all that time and effort I put in at the beginning to creating, a product that people just love. I was like, you know what? This is nice. It's nice to get, after all those years, our customers that we didn't spend, even now, just this year, we're just starting to market. So for 3 years, it's just, hey, I got my soap from the design house. I dealt with Eileen, I dealt with Saganda, I dealt with whoever. And they just came through word of mouth. And seeing that, your brand, your furniture, that people love it so much, that's really nice. That in itself, I think, now you never look at these things. I mean, now, unless you asked me, I can't say I'd sit there on a daily basis and be like...
Now, there's no time to be taking pride over these things because there's so much to do, isn't it?
Right? So I think until someone actually asks you...
It doesn't click.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I asked you that question. At least now you know what you can take.
There's probably so much more I'm going to be afterwards being like,
I should have said this.
Yeah.
Sharon, it's been a lovely conversation. I think
So
I've
nice.
learned quite a bit myself, and I'm sure those watching have also taken a thing or two away from you. We'll keep in touch, of course, as always. There's a lot we can work together on. And I'm sure Fabric Library is going to be and will always be one of your best partners in whatever you're trying to achieve. And we'll do everything in our strengths that we can to help you achieve your goals, which is, to become this big, which you already are, big furniture house in the country. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for all the support you give me as well. And to Gary and the whole team.
It is our pleasure. Sharon
Thanks so
O'Keeffe
much.
from the Design House
Thank you.
on this episode of the Fabric Library podcast. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.